Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining at 9 a.m. So this talk is going to be about plenty of things, mostly a tool called Forge, and as you'll see, a lot of Java EE stuff, but also plenty of other things, mostly live coding. Okay, so my name is Antonio. I'm a contractor, a developer. I've been in the Java EE space for quite a long time. I'm a former BEA employee, so I used to do EJB 1.0 a long, long time ago. And in the meantime, I've discovered other things and wrote some books and played with Java user groups and stuff like that. So let's go straight to the point. Facts. Java EE is boring. I even wonder why you're here at 9 a.m. on a Friday. Slow. Complicated. Not fashion. Can we change this? No. It is like that. Java EE is like that. It's boring, slow, complicated, out of fashion, for good reasons and bad reasons. The bad reasons is, for example, there's not a single website. You can't go on www.javaee.io. So where do you start? You go to the jcp.org, then you find hundreds of specifications. You don't know which one is which one is under which spec. So then you have to buy books like mine, really good. But again, how do you integrate that? You find books about JPA. You find books about JSF. My book tends to talk about everything, you know. Java 7 is 32 specs. If you put all the specs together, it's something about 8,000 pages long of specifications. Where do you start? So it's a difficult topic. Then it's out of fashion. Yes, and that's a good thing, actually, because Java EE is about creating standards, and you don't want to standardize things too early. So Java EE is out of date and will always be. It's, you know, to standardize things that will stay long. You know, you can't see it here, but I have a plug which is standard in most of the countries of Europe, and when I come here, I need to buy an adapter. You know, a shame you didn't follow the same standard. It's like driving on the wrong side of the road. Why would you do that? You know, so standards are good, but they have to arrive late in history. So we can't change that. You know, that's what Java is. I hope that one day we'll have a fantastic website, a single point where everybody can go read tutorials, etc., etc. At the moment, you find articles throughout, you know, Red Hat, IBM, Oracle, and everybody, which is good. But you know, a central point would be better, and maybe one day we'll have that. Anyway, so starting a project with Java EE, it's a bit of a drag. You never know where to start. So can we get some help? Yes, from tooling. There's plenty of tools out there, graphical tools, wizards within your IDE and things like that. I'm going to talk today about a tool called Forge, JBoss Forge, from the Red Hat. So JBoss Forge, as you will see, it's a tool to generate code, scaffold code, and it's based on add-ons. So I will show you a slide lately. Basically, Forge is an engine, and you plug add-ons on it. And I'll show you, I'll be using plenty of add-ons, and at the end, we'll even develop a small add-on. So it's good because it generates code. It does, Java code and XML and JSON and so on. So it takes care of integration. You know, integration in Java EE is difficult. If you use JPA and a servlet, which deployment descriptor do you use? What are the versions? What are the properties? And so on. So I'll start with a bit of Java EE, and then I will show you 2 or 3 different things, because as you'll see at the end, Forge is about generating code. Its genesis comes from Java EE, but basically is there to generate any code, any architecture, any platform, any tooling. Enough slides. Now I'll code from now on. So I'm going to use the terminal. I hope you can see it okay from the back. So you go to the internet, you download a zip, JBoss Forge, you unzip, and it's ready to go. Under the bin directory, you have a shell called Forge, and if you execute this shell, here I'm using the latest 2.16.2 that was released on Monday, actually, and then it's a shell. So if I press tab, there's things happening. You know, it tells you these are the commands. So if I type V and tab again, version, I press enter. Okay, so it's really a shell, what we are used to when we work on the Linux world. This shell is an add-on. I will show you, later why this is just an add-on. This is just a way to interact with Forge, but there's other ways to interact with Forge, as you'll see. So I want to start a Java EE project. What do I do? Maven, Gradle, my own? Well, actually, again, you have a Maven add-on and a Gradle add-on. So if I type a command called project new, I give a name to the project. I'm going to call it quick demo. And here I have build systems. I only have the Maven add-on installed, but if I had installed Gradle, I could have 2 choices here. So depending on the build system that you like, there's an add-on for Maven and an add-on for Gradle. So by default, it's going to use Maven. Project new, voila. The project is done, created. Okay, let's go and have a look at the project now. What has Forge done for us? That was a Monty Python thing, no? Didn't. What have the Romans done for us, or something like that? So by default, it still comes with Java 1.7. So this command has created a pom.xml because I told him to use Maven. By default, it created a war, but again, there's plenty of options, and I could tell him create a ER, create a jar. And because it's a war, by default, it's Java 1.7, and there's even the Maven war plugin installed. And I have a Maven directory, which is empty at the moment. So there's not really EE stuff there. Okay, so now I have this basic project. I want to, have an entity, and I can store data in the database, and I want a web application to do CRUD operations and a REST endpoint. So let's do that. So now that the project is created, I have more commands. So if I press tab, I have 128 commands. I used to only have 30. Now, because Forge has understood that I've created a project, I have all these new commands available. So if I press yes, I can see that I have servlet commands, rests, JPA, JMS, Java, Git, Faces, plenty of stuff. So let's start with an entity. You know, an entity, which spec version, which persistence, Hibernate, Open JPA, what do I do? Again, there's a command called JPA new entity, and I give it a name called quick entity. And again, I have plenty of parameters here, so I can change the JPA version. And again, if I press tab, I have the choices between 2.0 or 2.1. The provider, by default, it's Hibernate, but I can choose from Open JPA, Eclipse Link. So again, let's use all the defaults that JBoss Forge is giving me. So let's create an entity. Success. So if I go back to the code, several things have happened. First of all, my pom.xml has been updated. So here I have a BOM, the Java EE6 BOM, and JForge is telling me that I'm using JPA 2.0. In fact, in Java EE6, it's JPA 2.0. He has created an entity by default under a package called model, but I can change that. And as you can see, my entity, there's already an ID, a version, getters, setters, the toString hash code, and there's even a persistence XML. By default, it's Hibernate. So it's using the properties, the Hibernate properties. If I had installed Eclipse Link, it would have been Eclipse Link properties. Okay, so an entity, I can have attributes and map them to the database. So I know there's a command called JPA new field. Again, I'm giving a name to the field, so that's quick string. And I can map it to the column name called quick. Enter. What happened behind the scenes? Well, the quick entity now has a string called quick string, and Forge has used the add column to bind it. And the toString has been updated, which is nice. Now I want this quick string to be not null. You know? So I want to put a constraint on that. So there's a specification called bin validation 1. Something, I think. So if I don't really know, there's I can add a constraint. So there's constraint add. And if I press tab, I can see that I have an on property. So now JBoss Forge will introspect the bin I'm in. So the bin I'm in is shown here, okay? This is where I am at the moment. Quick entity. So by pressing tab, it tells me, well, you have an ID, a version, and a quick string. I say, well, quick string, and on accessor, so you could put it on the getter. And I'm saying, well, which constraint do you want? Well, I'm going to pick up not null. Again, if I go back to the code, not null comes from the right package. There's even a validation.xml that has been created. And I can even create my own constraints. I know that creating a constraint takes an annotation and an implementation. It's quite a lot of work. So if I do my constraint, again, Forge has created it by default under the constraint package. And there's plenty of code that I don't have to deal with. Well, that's nice, but you know, I just have an entity and I want web pages and REST endpoints, and And I know there's plenty of frameworks out there that do scaffolding, Rails, Grels. Well, let's do the same. There's, with Forge, scaffoldings. So there's this command, scaffold generate, who will take an entity and scaffold web pages. So what's interesting is, again, I have plugins here. I have add-ons. So there's an add-on for JSF and an add-on for AngularJS. I don't know AngularJS, but that's a nice way to learn. And actually, because I don't know AngularJS, I've created a few apps with Forge just to learn how it works. So Forge is, also a tool to learn new technologies in a real project, not just hello worlds. So I'm going to use faces because you're here today to see EE stuff. So I'm going to take faces, and I'm saying, generate, scaffold a web application for my quick entity. Plenty of things have happened. First of all, Forge has created a JSF backing bin. So you see there's annotation, named, stateful, and conversation scope. So if you don't know what that means, it's also a nice way to discover. The code is there, and as you'll see, it's working. So you can play with it. So here, actually, it's CDI, EJB, and CDI. So, he has created stuff for me. It injects conversation and entity manager with a unit name that is defined in the persistence XML. So everything is taken care of. There's create, retrieve, basically here I have a bunch of code that does CRUD operations on my entity. And Forge has created plenty of things in the web department. The CDI is set up. I have a bins XML. Faces config is set up. Web XML is set up with, a few error pages and so on. Resources, so it's using Bootstrap 2. It still hasn't been updated to Bootstrap 3. And what are we really looking at? Web pages to do CRUD operations on my entity. This is facelets. Again, everything is taken care of, and we will have a visual look in a few minutes. And later, if I have a bit of time, I will do that with AngularJS, like that, okay? But because this is a talk about buzzwords, I need to introduce a 2-year-old buzzword or 3-year-old buzzword, REST endpoints, Now, if you do a decent app, you need REST endpoints. And in Java EE, there's this thing called JAX-RS, but you don't know if it's, on top of servlets. Do I need servlets? Do I need to declare stuff in the web XML and so on? So again, if you don't know, you ask your friend JBoss Forge, and you go REST, generate endpoints from entities. As you might have guessed, I give it the name of my quick entity, shebang, JAX-RS has been installed. And again, here I have a REST endpoint path, so that comes from JAX-RS. Stateless, that's come from EJB. Why? Well, because the REST endpoint will also do CRUD operations. So it injects the same entity manager as my biking bin. And you see, I can create a quick entity with a post. There's a delete, get, with queries. So the queries have been dynamically created. So I have JPA, CDI, bin validation, servlets, JAX-RS, JSF, you know, in just a few seconds, a few minutes because I'm talking, you know, otherwise it would be seconds. Does this work? Let's try to build it first. Again, I'm using Maven. I'm not typing Maven commands because don't forget that Forge is agnostic. It could be Gradle. So I'm not typing Maven install, but build. You know, there's a command called build, and it's invoking the build system. In my case, it's Maven. It could be Gradle. So if I do build, you know, it's Maven, basically. It's a Maven clean install. Now I have a WAR file. I suppose that somewhere under the target, I have a WAR file. So I can deploy this WAR file on an app server. But let's stay on Forge. Forge has, again, a few app server add-ons. GlassFish, JBoss. Not sure about WebSphere and Weblogic. I'm not sure about that. Maybe. So let's use Wildfly. So I've installed the Wildfly plugin. And now I need to set it up. So I'm saying I'm going to set up Wildfly 8. And I'm going to pick up a version that I know it works because I wanted to try that with the latest, greatest Alpha 10, but it didn't work. So here I'm setting up. I'm just setting up the app server. So now JBoss Forge will create an XML file somewhere so it remembers its Wildfly. Well, let's start Wildfly then. So again, that's good because to start Wildfly, if you don't know it, you know, it's under the bin directory and there's a shell called something. So here with the add-on, he does it for you. And let's deploy the application. Okay, well, looks like there's things happening. You know, Hibernate and EJBs, and it looks like the deployment was successful. So, was it successful? Quick demo. Hey. It's at this moment where you should clap your hands. You know, I've created a full Java EE. Wait. It might not be working. So let's give it a try. So, entity. Let's create a new entity. You know, let's call it foo. Here it is. Let's create a new one. Bar. Here it is. I can click on it. I can edit it, change, and delete. So I have the CRUD working, and just to make sure it's in the database somewhere, I can actually see here I'm invoking my REST endpoint, and I'm telling my REST endpoint, give me all the entities, or I can go even /1. So now you can clap because you know it's working. So that was pretty easy. I used JBoss Forge a lot to do little things very quickly, testing new things with new technologies and so on. Okay. Let's undeploy the application, so I'm sure. Let's also shut down JBoss. So Java EE is cool, but the big problem with Java EE is testing. You know, either you mock everything, and you know at the end of the day it doesn't make sense. The EE world lives in a container, so if you take the code out of the container, you lose all the magic of the container. and you have to mock all the services, and it's a real pain. But there's this thing called Archillion. Who knows what Archillion is? So Archillion is a testing framework within containers. And if you go to the website, there's plenty of add-ons. You know, you can test code in JBoss, in Wildfly, in WebSphere, in this database, in that database. There's with Selenium, etc., etc. It's quite rich, you know. So again, where do you start? You know, if I want to test this application, what do I do? There's an Archillion add-on on JBoss Forge, and that's really handy. So I have commands that are called Archillion. Again, I need to first set up Archillion. Archillion comes in two flavors, either test-ng or JUnit. So I'm going to use JUnit. So JUnit, if I press tab, it gives you which version of JUnit you want to use. Well, let's use the latest and greatest. And then, because Wildfly tests within a container, I have to tell it which container to use. Tomcat, OpenEJB, Weld, WebSphere. I'm going to use Wildfly, but, oops, Wildfly remote. Oh, sorry. Wildfly remote. So Archillion comes in different modes. Either Archillion can start your app server, deploy the code, test it, undeploy, and stop the server. But what I like to do is use in a remote mode. So I'm going to start Wildfly in a different process, and Archillion will take my code, package it, deploy it in a running Wildfly, test it, and undeploy it. And Wildfly will be up and running. So that's how I use it, and also it saves time. It doesn't need to start the container, shut it down, start, shut down. So that's what I'm going to do, and again, I have to tell it which version, and the version that works fine is Wildfly 8.2. So it's set up. Again, there's plenty of things happening, and if you go to the code, you'll see that in the pom.xml, he has configured the Archillion plugin, and it created a profile saying, if you want to test on a remote Wildfly, you should use this profile. And this way with Archillion, you can test within Tomcat, within Weblogic or GlassFish, just by switching profiles, which is very handy. Okay, so that's fine, but now I want to create a test. So there's this command called Archillion create tests. I give a target, you know, again, and this time I'm going to create the JSF controller. So the JSF backing bin is a stateful EJB. He uses CDI, injects all these things. So I want to test that. View dot, how is it called again? Quick entity bin. Entity bin, oh, reminds me, bad memories. And because it uses JPA, I have to tell him enable JPA. Bang, again, so he has created, Forge has created a test case. Everything is plugged in, so it's the Archillion runner. And look at that. The idea is it's going to inject the controller bin. So this is the test class. And what it does is it packages the controller into a jar file with a persistence XML and a bins XML, empty. And to pass the test here, you see that it's saying the entity bin should be not null, and that is just getting injected. So this test, if this test passes, is because Architecte packaged this test class plus my quick entity bin into a jar, has deployed it into Wildfly, run the tests, and if the test is green, it's because this has been injected. Okay? Again, I've chosen the remote mode. So here I have Wildfly, and I'm going to start it. So on this tab, I have a Wildfly running, and the idea is to tell Architecte to test. Well, let's use Forge again. You know, I can do a Maven test and the profile, but I can also use this build command. So build test will actually call a Maven test. The only thing I need to tell is the profile in the pom.xml, this one, okay? So if I give it the profile name, it's packaging, it's doing stuff, and it fails miserably. And it's true that on the other side, I have my JBoss here that also failed miserably. Why? Well, that's because here, Architecte is packaging only the controller. But, hey, the controller depends on the entity, actually. So here, I'm saying to Architecte, package in a jar file the JSF controller plus the entity. So now, if I go back here, it's compiling. You can see the logs here, okay? So things are happening, and ladies and gentlemen, the test is green. I think you can clap too. So in half an hour, I've created an application and tested it. And because I'm talking a lot. So this is the genesis of JBoss Forge. Java EE, Architecte. Architecte is a project from JBoss. And different add-ons have been created. This is an add-on. I'm using the command line interface. It's just an add-on. If I go back to the slide, this is what JBoss Forge really is. It's a runtime called Furnace. So it's just a runtime with bits in the middle, of course. And then the entire structure of JBoss Forge is being able to plug in add-ons. So I plug an add-on. And so there's an event bus because JBoss Forge is built on top of CDI. So there's events going back and forth from different add-ons. And basically, JBoss Forge is just a runtime with plenty of add-ons. And actually, there's even an add-on command list to show you all the add-ons. The shell is a add-on. You know, if you take the shell add-on out, you have a runtime. You can't interact with it, but you can do other stuff with it. But look at that. I'm in front of IntelliJ IDE, and there's actually a JBoss Forge add-on for IntelliJ IDE. So it takes a bit of time to load the first time. See, it's loading underneath. I don't know if you can see it. So the first time you launch the add-on, it takes a bit of time because it's running a different instance of JBoss Forge. And now I have the same commands here that I'm running on the command line. And let me show you something. I'm going to say CDI new bin here. Package name, by default, it's bin. Otherwise, I can use a package name. Type name, scope. Alternative, named. And if I do a CDI new bin, I have exactly the same parameters. So if I go scope, I have the same choices. And the really good thing that I like about Forge is you are not locked in Forge. I'll go back to the pom.xml. There's no Forge dependency at all. And you know how Forge works? In a very unclever way. He spends most of its time passing code and generating code. Look at that. So here I'm going to say, my bin. I'm creating a bin. Okay, bin created with the IntelliJ IDE add-on. So if I go, let's go back to my root. I always tap LL instead of LS. And he's clever, he's saying, do you want to tap LS? And I can say, yes, okay, I'm going to do LS, but I know I'm going to type LL anyway. So I can create an alias, which is ND LS. Voilà. Good. So now I'm going to go to the bin I've just created. So it's under the bin directory. When I cd inside the bin, see, I can do that. cd my bin. I can also tap LL, and I can see what's inside the bin. Completely empty at the moment. Let's do cdi add an observer method. So I'm going to give it a name, observes, and the type of the event, I'm going to use Java long string. Okay? Typo. It's not a big deal, because the generated code, of course, there's a typo here. I can do that. You know, I'm not hooked into Forge. I can do LL now, and I know there's observe method. I can come back here on Forge. Oops. Sorry. And I can go Java new field. My string of type string, but I can choose something different. Just taking the default here to be quick. Generate, getter, setter, toString. Okay, finish. So now I don't know why, but the plugin needs a bit of time to update. I don't know if it's it should be updating. Strange. Yep. I don't know why it does that with IntelliJ. Now, if I go back here, I type LL. It discovers there's a string, an observes method, a toString. And just to show you that it's really true, I'm not hooked with Forge at all, is I can create a toString too. And when I do LL, JBoss Forge introspects the code. So that's why if you look at the pom.xml, there's nothing about Forge here. Okay, there's no Forge dependency at all. When I type a command, Forge introspects the code and does something. So each time I do a ls, it introspects the code. There's no caching. You will not find a .forge somewhere. Okay, in your project, there's nothing about Forge. It's just there to help you create code, and then you dump it, and you do things on your own. So I have 12 minutes here. I have other things to show you, but because we are on the buzzword bingo, you know, we did a REST interface. That was cool. But that was old, you know. REST, it's about 3 or 4 years old now. So the new thing, you know, I was thinking of a new buzzword, Angular, again, not buzzy anymore. plus they're going to kill the 1.x version, creating something new. So the big buzzword at the moment is microservices. I've heard it. Yeah, yeah. Let's create a microservice with Java EE. So what is a microservice? You don't know? Me neither. But there's something interesting in this whole microservice thing. Is something I've been fighting for a long, long time in the Java EE expert group. Is to, Java EE is full of little specifications. An application server implements all these little specifications. Why do we need to start an app server that does all the specifications? Why not picking up only a few? And when you look at Wildfly is built on modules. GlassFish is built on modules. So technically, you could say this app server only needs JPA and servlets. So only, start up the two modules, the two specifications, make it quick, something really small. And by the way, can you put all that into a fat jar? So I just go java.jar, bang. That's what I'm going to do right now for you. Using another add-on. Actually, this is the JBoss Forge add-on page. So there's, as you can see, there's even an add-on to create JIRAs within the command line. Twitter, you can tweet with Forge. Archelian, Eyrolles, Mail, rich faces, prime faces. So there's plenty, Angular, Gradle. There's plenty of add-ons, and I'm going to use one, a brand new one in Alpha 3 called Wildfly Swarm. Wildfly Swarm is at a very early stage. Basically, is the guys from JBoss who said, hey, JBoss is modular. Everybody's talking about microservices and making things small. Let's use the modules of JBoss to create tiny executable jars that you can run in a command line. So let's do that. I'm going to go back to Forge. I'm going to, actually create a new project. I could stay on the other one, but I will come back later. So, project new. Let's give it a name. Quick Micro. Okay. Sounds like a nice name. And there's a command called rest new endpoint. I'm going to give it a name, quick endpoint. And you can even implement a few methods if I want. So because I'm lazy, I'm going to tell him, can you do a get command quickly? Here he goes. So now if I go to IntelliJ and open this new project. So it's not the quick demo, it's the quick micro. So I have a quick endpoint, really easy. See, it does a get, and it returns OK with a method do get invoked. And just to show you that this is working, I'm going to build it. So I'm going to build this quick REST endpoints, and actually I'm going to show you something. So here I have a quick micro war file. It's 3Ks. I just have my REST endpoint. So because Wildfly is up and running on this side, I'm going to actually deploy this WAR file. So nothing there. I choose temp, CDI, quick micro, and I'm taking this 3K WAR file, deploying it, up, and if I go to localhost quick, was it micro, rest quick, bang, it does a HTTP GET. That's good. It's working. Just to show you that I'm killing wildfly now. So if I come back here, okay, it's not working. I'm even going to change microservice. Yeah. And because I don't really know how it works, there's a command called oops, I'm not in the right. Wildfly swarm setup. What it does, nothing much. It just updates my pom.xml with swarm things. So it's saying, I know you are using JAX-RS, so I'm saying that you depend on the JAX-RS fraction. It's called a fraction in the swarm world. And I have a swarm plugin that's going to do a bit of magic during the package phase. So if I do, let's go back to the good old Maven. Okay, I can do a Maven clean package. And now Swarm is packaging not a WAR file, but a jar file. Look, my WAR file is still here, but Swarm has created a quick micro -swarm.jar. And as you can see, it's 30 mega big. And if I look inside, there's my WAR file. So inside a jar file, I can find my WAR file, which is unusual, plus bits and pieces. If you know Spring Boot, that's roughly the same idea. Is WAR files are defined, you know what's under a webamp, leave, etc., etc. ER files too. A jar file is just an archive where you can bunch anything you want, really. So we're just agreeing on the structure of the jar file. Spring Boot does it one way. Swarm does it a different way. But basically, if you unzip this quick micro swarm, you will find JBoss modules. You will find the JAX-RS fraction. You will find your code. So now, java-jar target. So I'm going to execute this jar file. And look at the output. Well, it looks like, there's a JBoss app server listening somewhere. Ladies and gentlemen, a Java EE microservice. Yes. All that I've been showing you can be scripted, actually. So if I go, oops. Here Here I have this generate Forge shell that I've created. If I open it, I have all the commands. So here I'm creating a package, a project called Project JSF with a speaker, an entity, with a name, a surname, constraints, dates. Look at that. A one-to-many relationship. JBoss Forge can scaffold one-to-many and many-to-many relationships. An enum. A book is written in English, in French. As a title, I'm scaffolding in JSF. It's just a matter of doing run and giving it the name of the Forge script. So now it's creating a project for me. So you can have those shell scripts that do bits and pieces, set up a logger, you know, JPA with code that you've written. And so I've created JSF application. But what I can do is change this and say, this call is project Angular. I've told you we'll be doing a bit of AngularJS. And here, instead of the provider faces AngularJS, and I run it again, and I have a new project. Just by changing one line, you know, unfortunately, I have 1 minute left. I'm going to see if I can build it and deploy it. Challenge accepted. So build. So I'm building the, am I on the right one? Angular, okay. So now I have a WAR file. I go to, here I'm going to deploy my Angular.js. So it's this one, target, WAR file. Pressure. Ladies and gentlemen, Angular. If you don't know much about Java EE and want to learn more, there's a fantastic book I've written. And I also created 3 courses on Java EE. About CDI, JPA, and bin validation. You have to pay for it, but if you want a free card, it's here on the desk, and you can follow my courses on Pluralsight. Thank you.